Welcome to Beyond the Blend, the podcast that goes behind the science and talks to the people at the heart of the lubricant market, telling the real story of the people who make the lubricant market move. With real insight and honest conversations, we aim to show off the people's side from across the entire lubricant supply chain. Join me, Steve Knapp, and Rob Taylor as we delve behind the scenes of the lubricant industry. Let's go. Before we get into it, Gwyn, we always start with a quick 5 from 5. No wrong or right answers, just the first thing that comes to your mind. Big picture or deep dive detail?
Deep dive detail.
Red-eye flight or night before hotel?
Red-eye flight.
Liverpool comeback or Wrexham underdog win?
Liverpool comeback.
Post-match pint or early morning gym?
Post-match pint.
And Gwyn, lead from the front or empower from behind?
Lead from the front.
Wonderful. What a great set of answers. And it'll become clear why we ask some of those as we get through our conversation. But sometimes the best conversations start in unexpected places. Yeah, we've been connected together on LinkedIn for quite a while, and we've swapped the occasional message. And even you shared a post about reading our Modern Sales Leadership book on holiday.
I did, yes.
And you sort of got this workplace book club, and it'll be good to sort of understand that a bit. But then fate would have it that we bumped into each other in the airport security heading to the Lubes Expo in Dusseldorf. Yep. Yeah, one of those moments where that online and connection becomes real, right? Yep. But the funny point to that, Gwyn, was that you recognise my voice.
I did indeed, yes.
before anything else, and probably due to the podcast. So, Gwyn, your story takes us from University of Staffordshire straight to oil analysis. And the career around using data to help customers protect their assets. But they're my words. Gwyn, in your words, introduce yourself to our Beyond the Blend listeners.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. It's a pleasure to be on here today to listen to your voice again. Not in person this time, but So my name's Gwyn Simmonds. I'm the Executive Director of Global Sales and Marketing at Polaris Laboratories. So we have a network of 8 laboratories globally, specifically working in the fluid analysis or oil analysis sector, supporting our customers, lubricant companies, OEMs, end users as well. And probably very similar to a previous podcast you had with Gemma Stevenson. I kind of fell into this industry. I did my degree in geology in University of Staffordshire, as you just said. And where I live in North Wales, there's always been a very large kind of geological consultancy. So back in the days when newspaper contained job adverts, I saw this job advert working in a oil testing laboratory at Robertson's Research, which was this geological exploration consultants. So I thought, great, I'll be going to Saudi, I'll be going to the North Sea, all these exotic places, looking at crude oil and things like that. And I'll never forget, I went for the interview, and the guy interviewing me, the general manager at the time, said, well, yeah, it's like engine oil analysis. And it's absolutely, lost on me. I was like, well, why do people test engine oils and gearbox oils and things like that? But I was pretty much, a few months out of university, needed a job, needed money. And they said, yeah, we quite like you. So I couldn't be that bad in the interview. When can you start? And going back to the football analogy at the beginning, it was January the 25th, 1999. And it was the day after Liverpool lost to Manchester United in the FA Cup in their treble winning season. So which I try and forget about. So, I started working in the lab, worked in the lab for probably 2 to 3 years. Part of, back in 1999, things were as automated in the lab as perhaps they are now, and you used to have to type in all of the results for acid number, viscosity, all the tests we were doing in the lab into the database. And the office contained these 3 guys who were the data interpreters, data analysts who used to make the comments on the reports that went out to the customers. So I kind of took a bit of an interest in that. Well, sitting in an office is a bit better than working in a lab coat and, getting dirty and covered in, oil every day and stuff like that. And I'm always quite curious, got a bit of a curious mind, like to know how things are done, what was the end product. And, I'll never forget there was a guy there called Mike Bourne, who was one of these data analysts. He was kind of a time-served engineer, very experienced. And he just showed me how the data started going together. So you take the viscosity from the sample tube, you put that against other parameters. And this is kind of the whole world of interpretation and analysis. And that kind of interests me a little bit. And I learned a huge amount because I'm not an engineer by background. I didn't know how an engine worked or why a conveyor gear is different to a rolling gear or anything like that as well at the time. And he taught me a lot about kind of the engineering and things that allowed me then to understand kind of the broader picture of the fluid analysis services that, Robertson's Research at the time provided to the customers. So that was kind of my next step and kind of a natural progression into kind of account management and sales, covered after that as well. So it's similar to Gemma's, it's kind of lab coat to kind of sales leadership, if you like.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, the amount of people that I know and speak to that studied in one thing, and absolutely has no connection whatsoever to where they ended up. And for you, it was geology, right?
Yes.
So what was the interest there? Where did that all stem from?
So, I mean, I think it kind of stems back to I was in school. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and kind of like a hydrogeologist or something like that was kind of an interest, or kind of marine biology, things like that. So my A levels were geography, geology, and biology, and doing the A levels, I quite enjoyed the geological aspect. Kind of thinking with kind of the oil industry at the back of my mind, but kind of probably more upstream than the downstream, section that I've spent the last 25 years in.
Yeah. I mean, you reminded me there, it's funny how your mind goes back to things. You might remember there was a television advert with Maureen Lipman where she said on the phone, "He's got an ology."
Yes,
and
I remember it. Yeah,
you had three ologies.
I did
there,
indeed.
Didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So, what was she advertising? Was that British Telecom?
BT, wasn't it? I think it was a BT advert.
BT,
yeah.
But look, that aside, what's kept you there? What's kept you here? So you left. So you geology into oil analysis.
Yes.
But what's kept you here for so long?
I think really just kind of a natural progression. So, I worked in the lab, and then I kind of became a lab supervisor. And then in 2002, the lab moved to a purpose-built facility in Conway and was there under different guises until probably a couple of years ago. With that kind of expansion, we took on some, two very large lubricant manufacturer programs. They were kind of, repurposing their own lab, and Robertson's Research at the time took the business over. I'm quite a social person, so I've always liked people and kind of that social aspect of it. And it was like, well, do I want to stay in the lab and just wear a lab coat for the rest of my life? Probably not really my, kind of future plans. And I'd said to my manager at the time, I said, I very much like, is there anything to do with kind of account management? And I was doing kind of this data analysis for a period of time to kind of learn and expand my technical knowledge. And one of the programs was the TexJet program, which was the Texaco lubricants at the time. And my manager at the time, Bob, said to me, "Well, yeah, phone this lady." And this lady was called Suzanne Haslam, who I still deal with now at Chevron. And she phoned me up and said, "Right, I need a project manager. I've been given your name. I need you to do this, and this." So pretty much straight away, I had to learn on my feet about how account management worked. Having that technical kind of background from the data analysis I've been doing certainly helped with, explaining limits, commenting and things like that on the report as well. Must have been relatively successful with that. And, more accounts got added to my kind of portfolio. And then, so I did that again, probably for a couple of years. And then the business was sold in 2005 to a company called Alcontrol, who had environmental laboratories, pharmaceuticals, food, water, and things like that. And the CEO said to Bob, the general manager, you need to diversify. You can't do sales, you can't do operations. So I then kind of moved into a UK sales role. So there's a bit of business development. I then started to go out, with a with a car, visiting customers and opportunities in the UK. Originally, quite like that, quite like going out, meeting new people, chatting, building relationships and things like that. And then it kind of progressed from there, really. And I stayed doing that, and that kind of morphed into a more of a kind of a European sales role as the business expanded into Europe to around about 2013. And then the lab I was working at did all of the Chevron business, and there was a kind of a globalization of the Chevron. I met a lady from Polaris who came over and said, this is how it works in terms of the data transfer and things like that. She must have quite liked me. She said, oh, we're building a lab in Europe. Would you like to join Polaris? It's just sales. And then I met Brian, who's my line manager now, the CEO of Polaris in a pub in London in 2012. We had a good chat, hit it off, very similar kind of thoughts about the way the industry was going, the technology and things like that. And so yeah, I joined Polaris in 2013. So
that's cool. I mean, the period you're describing as well, I imagine has seen incredible change in terms of, you talk about technology, let alone the market dynamics, but just when you first started to describe when you first entered, you said 3 guys in lab coats. Is it still people in lab coats, or is it now AI and testing, and what is it? Give us a little bit of a view.
Yeah, I mean we have Polaris has laboratories in our company name, but we operate very much like a tech company. We're very agile, we're very lean. Everything is kind of focused on continuous improvement. Yes, there are still people in lab coats, although probably now it's more of a blue Polaris t-shirt, and black jeans rather than the kind of stereotypical, kind of beaker looking white lab coat with, big safety glasses and goggles and things like that. So we still have that, but there's been huge strides in automation, particularly of the lab equipment now with robots. So you're not someone like I was 25 years ago, stood there with a pipette, doing this 2,000 times a day. There's robots and injectors now doing all this kind of thing as well. And, that was apparent, where I used to work, but even more so at Polaris, where there's a high level of automation on the lab side. But then, on the data analysis side as well, it was, when I first was subjected to it, it was 3 guys one was a mining engineer, one was an ex-ExxonMobil technical engineer, another guy was ex-RAF. Whereas now it's, data people, people who are interested in data, looking at kind of algorithms, the AI, the machine learning aspect and things like that as well. So there's a much higher kind of IT input now, perhaps to where it was as well. And, we launched our Aurora data interpretation or data analysis software this year, and that incorporates, it's like a big rules engine, and that's looking at lots of different algorithms and standardizing. A Caterpillar engine is different to a Cummins engine, or an SEW gearbox is different to a Bosch Rexroth pump or something like that. So it's taking all of these different parameters into consideration when it's looking at the flagging and and the commenting that on the reports that finally go out to the customer as well. So it's a big change. All we talk about now in kind of opportunity meetings is, how can I get my data? How can I integrate my data? What does the data look like? Have you got a mobile app? So it's all about APIs and, synchronization and integration of the data now, more so than, or what method do you use for viscosity? Because pretty much everybody uses the same method for viscosity, Yeah.
And I find it, thinking about our audience listening in and the purpose of Beyond the Blend, we're starting to show people just how wide and broad the lubricant sector is, and the skills that people can bring to it. The skills that people brought back in 1999 probably are slightly different skills to now, right? You brought a technical, geology.
Yes, yeah.
By the way,
Yep.
not even
Yeah.
chemistry, but now we're talking about people that are probably more digital savvy, I guess, as well as, So does that start to look different with the people in your business?
It does. I mean, literally just before this call now, I was on with our business analyst in the US, who's a younger guy, and, he's building these, dashboards in Power BI and Tableau, and he's doing, lots of different things in Salesforce about tracking metrics, purely from the sales standpoint. Whereas historically it was, spreadsheets, exports, waiting for stuff to come from finance team or accounts. He's dynamically changing things on the go. And, he's got absolutely no background in science, no background in, engineering or anything like that. He's just an IT guy, but he's working as part of our sales team, to help us look for anomalies or spot changes, trends and things like that. Even from, kind of the interpretation or the technical side, time series engineers are still important. We still need to have that, very high level technical discussions with some of our customers, but it's, some of the analysis team have come through the lab, so they understand the testing piece of it. And then it's about learning, kind of the technology and the AI side that puts the flags and the numbers on the report that, fundamentally goes out to the customer as well. So, they're younger people coming through, whereas perhaps historically it was, well, to be a data analyst, you've got to be 55 years old and 30 years on the tools or something like that,
Yeah. I think that's fascinating when we start to think about how that skill set can succeed now. That's just different to what it might have been before. And I think that starts to become really important when people listen in and start to think about, well, what could I actually do? And you're describing many ways there that, a different skill set could be advantageous to companies like yourself. When I start to then reflect upon that one step from technical to commercial, it sounds like it came easy to you. Did it?
It was a long journey. It wasn't literally like a light switch event. I kind of been doing the technical bit, probably starting, 2001, 2002, and kind of carried that through now. And, I was still doing some of that kind of technical interpretation probably up to 2013 because I had the ability to do it. And in sales, if the customer says, I need this now, and you've got the capability to do it, you do it rather than wait for somebody else to do it. But, since I've joined Polaris, I haven't, I can still have those technical conversations and do training on it, but I don't actually sit there and process, 5,000 samples a day, through it as well. I think you learn every day, even now, even after 20, 25 years in the industry. I could be in a meeting with one of our reliability team guys, the technical support, or one of our data analysts, or even, our CEO. And you think, oh yeah, I didn't think of it like that. It's just a different viewpoint, perhaps that you've thought before. It's neither right or wrong, but it just kind of, continually adds to that technical knowledge. And, I've luckily for me, I've always been pretty good at retaining information, which is very handy in pub quizzes.
I should say.
And kind of everybody wants to be on your team and, mocks you when you lose. People have called me, full of useless information and things like that as well. But there's obviously a part in there which contains some useful information as well, which kind of transitions, and it helps massively with the commercial aspect as well. Because, if you take something like, the Challenger sale or something like that, where you have to be that consultative salesperson rather than just turning at, you're selling product X and walk out the door. It helps that initial conversations, particularly when you're presenting or having that dialogue with a new customer, because you can back at, the service and the product that you're selling with kind of technical aspects at the same time.
I think what you share there is a really significant piece of insight because, it was easier for you because you had that,
yes, yeah,
that real technical knowledge. Yes, there might have been a more natural leaning to being, finding it easy to communicate and meet people, but there was the backup of the technical aspect. And when we start to look at our biorevolution research, you might have seen some of the things we're sharing, that product knowledge and application knowledge are the things that buyers covet or want the most from sellers. So I think it's a really important place for people to reflect upon, that it's good having skills, but having deep knowledge is something that makes things, easier to take forward.
It is, yeah. And particularly in our industry as well, because it can be quite a technical sale, because we're selling a service. We're not really selling a product, like a lubricant per se, which, is not a technical sale, but, you have to have the basic understandings of what is the customer using oil analysis or fluid analysis for? Because we work with, we'll work with an oil company and we'll be their contract lab, and, they'll sell that, through the distribution channels. We work with OEMs, engine compressor manufacturers, so they could be selling it as a warranty part, or a parts and service. And then we work with a lot of end users as well, who are literally the guys that are using our results to make those maintenance and reliability decisions. So you kind of have to know, A, who you're talking to, B, how they're going to use the product, and see, how effective and what type of service they want from us, in terms of the levels of testing, the technology, API integrations and stuff like that as well. So it's, yes, we have to grow the business by finding new opportunities, but you have to kind of, put them into sectors and say, right, well, this is the product and this is the presentation for the end user, which will be very different to a lubricant manufacturer or equipment manufacturers as well. And we're doing some training sessions now because we have our largest team is in the US because that's our headquarters and our biggest market, and we've got 2 or 3 relatively new people to the sales team in the last sort of 6 months. So we've just started some not necessarily sales training, but kind of industry training of why we sell this type of analysis to power gen versus manufacturing or marine or oil and gas, because the nuances are slightly different, although the service is similar. And I think it's really important that you speak in the customer's language when you go in to talk to them.
100%. 100%. I mean, and again, we would advocate that real personalization of messaging. So I think that sounds a really, really strong way forward. Now, if I'm thinking we've moved from university to the lab to a commercial role, when you introduced yourself, you said you're now the global lead for sales and marketing. So that would imply to me, Gwyn, there's now some leadership involved.
There
here,
is
right?
Indeed, yes.
Right. So now we've gone from lab analysis to individual contributor to someone that's leading others. How did that go? And what sort of moments drove that, have stood out and maybe been the biggest learning for you in the leadership space?
So, I mean, it was kind of a natural progression. So when I joined Polaris, I was kind of European territory sales manager and that. And then because we opened the lab in Poland and we have some customers in other regions where we don't necessarily have a lab, Asia, Africa. So I kind of took on the management of that because it's easier from Europe than it was from the US in terms of time zones. And, business grew quite successfully. Europe was growing double digits and continues to grow double digits year on year. Then an opportunity came for kind of the, director of all of the non-US sales, which came onto me because we have labs in Guatemala and Colombia. And then we had a bit of a change probably 2.5 years ago where we wanted closer alignment between the sales function and the marketing function. We wanted better synergies and campaigns marketing were driven by sales and vice versa. So I was kind of promoted to, head that kind of combined division, which, fundamentally looks after all sales globally and including in the US now as well. Our marketing team, and we have a fantastic marketing team. The collateral and the content we push out is great. We have a great marketing director leading that. And on one of the previous episodes, it's like everyone quotes Richard Branson, just say yes and then kind of learn how to do it, kind of thing as well. So it's it was like wow, and yes, it was like right. Well, I'm going to go to the US more often now, which, I go to the US 4 or 5 times a year. But I think it's helped massively by having really good leaders underneath me and learning from them as well. They know their roles, whether it's the North American or Latin American sales director or marketing director, in the US as well. Everybody kind of working in their own channel, but contributing in, bi-weekly or weekly stand-ups where this is what we're doing. So I think just that level of communication and kind of bringing out everybody else on the same journey makes my job a lot easier.
Yeah. And because in the 5 from 5, you mentioned leading from the front, didn't you? You leading instead of empowering from behind. What does leading from the front mean to you in this context then?
I mean, I think, going back to what we were saying before about having that technical knowledge in a commercial role is trying to bring everybody else, within all of our sales team, same level or as close as we can from the technical standpoint, because, we talk about that consultative selling approach. Now, it's great if you get a good opportunity, but if you can't answer the questions there and then, and a competitor might be coming in after you and that salesperson can, then it puts you at a direct disadvantage in their eyes because, well, why did they send this person? So it's about, trying to get everybody, to the same level. One of the other things, we're a very lean, continuous improvement, orientated organization operationally. Well, why can't we be like that in sales as well? why can't we do standard work, have standardized processes, and kind of getting everybody to follow those similar journeys, and as the leader, if I have to do it, then hopefully those guys can follow me as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I like that. I've always liked the idea of standardized sales processes, I have to say, but very difficult to achieve. We always used to have this thing about, sort of act global, but think local. I imagine that across the world, that has to happen, right? Because from one market to the other, there's going to be a slightly different approach, but always with that view of one process with some local adoption, I imagine. Yeah.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Even in terms of, some of the tests you do on, say like a natural gas engine in Europe, the requirements are different to what they do in the US as well. And, we'll quote similar customer a certain, service level in Europe, and they don't do it in the US. And then there's, well, why is it different? So even the service is the same, kind of the undercurrents can be different. Yeah.
Yeah.
The world's leading lubricants-focused trade event comes to the Middle East this January. Lubricant Expo Middle East will take place from the 20th to 22nd of January at Festival Arena, Dubai Festival City in the UAE. With over 120 exhibitors covering the entire lubricant value chain and 1,500 visitors, including industry leaders, OEMs and end users. It's an unmissable opportunity to meet and do business in this exciting region. Register now to attend for free. Head to lubricantexpo.com/me for more information.
Now, within this sort of leadership space, you've mentioned a few people. You mentioned Mike Bourne. You've mentioned, was it Susanna Haslam? I think some other people as well. Have there been role models, Gwyn, that you would... I'm not saying you have to now pick Mike as an example, but have there been moments and people and things that have shaped your leadership?
I think there's no kind of, one aspect. I think because in the role, in the roles I was at when I was at Alcontrol and now at Polaris, I've been, very lucky in having very long lasting relationships with customers, whether that's from an OEM standpoint. I think when I worked at Alcontrol, we used to do a lot of the work for Mobil. And there was a guy from around your neck of the woods called Phil Quinn, who worked for Mobil for many years, and he was very good at kind of sharing his knowledge. He not just on kind of the technical side as well, but how you act and work around customers as well. He used to bring a load of customers to North Wales for a training session every year, and myself and a colleague used to go out with him and a few other guys. So you just kind of sitting there. I was probably late 20s at the time, something like that. So still a bit young and, naive, shall we say, just kind of watching and observing of how people were. And, you kind of still do that now, 20, 25 years later, based on how people interact and they behave and what there is as well. So people like that. And, there's some other customers that, I've developed really good friendships with. You had Angus MacDonald on the pod a couple of weeks ago. Angus and I have been very good friends for, 20 years. We disagree on football and rugby, but outside of that, we get on as well. So, I think you're always constantly learning, from your peers and even your customers as well about how they go about themselves, how they do business and, what kind of knowledge they have outside of their core sector, which, I think certainly from a personal standpoint encourages you to say, well, I need to, learn a little bit more about that. So you can have those conversations, at the moment.
So spoiler alert, we are going to come on to football soon. So don't you worry.
Okay.
Don't you worry about that. I'm always interested listening in about long-term relationships and we do talk about this being really important, don't we? Trust, building those deep, meaningful, long-term relationships. And it seems a bit of a retrospective look-back question I'm going to ask now. But how did COVID and digitalization and meetings on Zoom and Teams, how did that impact you and your leadership? Because no one could ever have trained you to be ready and prepared for that.
It was a funny and strange time for everybody, wasn't it? I think we were quite lucky where we live in North Wales. One of my best friends lives next door. So although we were social distancing, we could still have a beer on the drive or a chat about whatever, you know what I mean? We were still, not breaking any laws. So, from kind of the societal impact, it was it was quite nice to spend, some time at home as well and not travel as much as I did do. But I think it brought some people closer because of that, I think, desire for human interaction outside of your family, which probably drove some people, stir crazy at times. And there was, with Valvoline, with a guy called Alistair Weston there, we did a lot of training courses. So there was like training courses, once per month on, oil analysis 101, how to sell oil analysis to the distribution network. So that brought lots of people that you perhaps wouldn't have met, without COVID, virtually in the same room on a Zoom or a Teams call. So you kind of did expand your network and the people you knew through those times as well. And I think from an internal standpoint, it was, we were quite lucky because all of our labs were classed as, vital businesses. So we continued and all the operational staff were still going in, socially distancing, hopefully every day. But from the sales and, the people that worked from home, there was very much that, right, we need to do different things. We need to, connect more via, digital communications. And previous marketing director set up a pretty good scheme where we do these, what we call champion chats. So we'd interview customers to get their insights. So we were, filling our time learning more about our customers, similar to what these pods are doing, about them as an individual, but also about their business and how Polaris, can help them or has helped them as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think listening to you, making the best of every situation seems to be something that I'm picking up, right? So whilst it was definitely a difficult time, the first place you went to was with a beer with your best mate on the drive. And I think, I have to say, I do love that as a philosophy, because I think that's the right way to look about things. But then also that continual learning opportunity, because I found ourselves, Rob and I, we were particularly busy during COVID, training people online. How much of it stuck, we don't know. How much of it was just because it was something to do, I don't know. But it was purposeful at the time, and I think it certainly helped us. And then I start to think about what it does for you as a leader, because I guess you really saw the need to keep the team connected. I mentioned in the introduction that you've got a book club at work, and this is not a clumsy way to talk about modern sales leadership. And the advert will now ping up on the podcast. No, it won't. But you read that, you posted it online. But the reason I bring it up, you've got some social environment going on at work around a book club. Share that, because I think it's a great practice.
Yeah, I mean, it started, with our kind of previous head of sales in North America, probably 10 years ago, and the first book we did was the Challenger Sale. So it was, how do we go to market, looking at how do we go to market, and I was, just the kind of a territory sales manager then. But it was trying to bring everybody. So there's that in terms of that standardization or that consistency of message, to the customer, internally and externally as well, about how we go to market. And we looked at how we go to market, and, we looked at the Challenger Sale, and, yes, if you think of the four types in the Challenger Sale, so would argue that, well, you still need to be that relationship builder, but kind of post sale event, which I think is critical. But in terms of that kind of hunting mentality, that consultative one, the Challenger Sale, and, it paid dividends. And, as sales teams, change and progress over the years, and now we have the sales team now, we did it again early this year with the Challenger Sale, because some people had read it, and I think it's always worth re-looking at it again, because sometimes practices fall off, or that level of retention, or everybody's busy doing other things. And then we also read lean selling, and how we project that kind of lean manufacturing operational environment into the sales process, about standardization, follow-up, which I know is one of your main points of, how often do you follow up, the frequency, the type and the content and things like that. And all of that is built into these standardized processes from a lean environment. So we did that as well. And the next one, which will probably start in the new year, will be modern sales leadership. So
Yeah, there we go. There we go. My hearing went a bit foggy on the previous ones, but no, I mean a great selection indeed. And the book club itself, therefore, is a great place to build community, share learning, and I love that as a vibe around Polaris. I think that's a really lovely thing to hear about, and a good way that you can bring a subject matter into a community. So that's brilliant. Look, I just want to move a little bit now on to, you've spoken about travel, and you mentioned that there was a lot pre-COVID.
Yes.
I imagine we all are fighting hard to get back to what it used to be, but now maybe thinking maybe we're doing it too much. But with your role, I mean, you've mentioned the different labs, the 8 labs globally, biggest team in America, biggest part of the business in America. So travel must be a constant for you. And I've seen your posts on LinkedIn about missing flights and having to have a pint of Guinness as an example. So this is multiple time zones, managing a diary of complexity. How do you stay balanced and prioritize what matters most? And I'm interested to how we can share learning and good practice for people listening in here.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a struggle. I mean, I think before COVID, when I was predominantly looking after the commercial aspect of our European business, because it was a brand new facility in 2014, although Polaris was a well-established brand globally, it almost felt as if it was my own business. And, to be fair to the leadership of Polaris, they kind of gave me free rein. You know the market, we don't know the market. As long as sales were improving, increasing, it was a bit of free rein. And I think, a lot of that was to do with trust. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and the tasks and growing the business, if you need to take your kids to school or you need to pick the kids up at school, then there's no, micromanagement's not a thing we do at all here at Polaris. And that's kind of the ethos of the whole company. And, there's a huge amount of trust given to the individual. And, if everything's going well on the sales side of things, which, thankfully they have been for a number of years, then you have that element of trust to have that flexibility in terms of, work-life balance and things like that as well. And luckily where I live, I obviously work from home, and, my eldest son's in high school now, but my youngest son is, finishing off primary, so I can, and it's 100 yards down the road, so I can take him, I can pick him up, spend a bit of time, and obviously been 5 hours ahead of our corporate HQ in Indianapolis. There are occasions where I'll do an 8 till 9 or a 7 till 8, and it's just about balancing. I'll maybe take an hour off in the day or something like that to do things as well, because it's very much based on trust. So it can be difficult. I mean, the last month has seen a lot of travel with the Lube Expo in Germany. Then I was at the Reliability Conference in Ireland. Then we had our own Polaris Customer Reliability Summit in Indianapolis. So 3 weeks on the bounce was pretty rough, but 2 or 3 weeks at home now kind of balances it out. And if I'm home for too long, I probably start getting under people's feet, and they say, "When are you traveling again?" So it's
well, they might. I mean, I have to say, when I listen in on that, I think it's some really important points, though. The culture, and that sort of that leadership aspect about you don't have to make a reason, just do the right thing. I think that really matters. And then what else I heard from you there, Gwyn, was that role modeling. Just the fact that you're now saying on something that's going to be broadcast that you'll go to school, you'll take an hour off, you'll maybe balance your day and work an hour at the back end as long as you compromise at the front end. I think they're really powerful lessons because, and I'm not saying this is the fault of any of my previous bosses when I was in global roles at Shell, but I found it very difficult managing. I had one boss who managed me who was based in Asia, and then a couple of years later, a boss that managed me who was based in North America, and I think I became more preoccupied about how I responded versus their demands as leaders. So I think the more they hear senior leaders say, no, I do it, it's fine, and talk about it, it's the better it is.
Yeah, and and I think it obviously comes down to the individual. But if I'm sat downstairs watching TV or something at 8:30 at night, and I'll get a Teams message on my phone, and it'll take me 30 seconds to answer it there and then, And that may make something go much quicker or improve the process for what it's being used for, rather than wait till, 7:30, 8 o'clock tomorrow morning when they're not going to see it till midday anyway. It just makes, the whole kind of process easier. And, we have a European sales guy now who's also ex-Shell, Mateus, in Poland. He used to say, I'm going to take a longer lunch because I need a haircut. I was like, I don't need to know, just, because I have complete trust in him doing his job and doing what we want him to do as a company, but also on a personal level as well. So and I think it just built, as you say, it builds that culture. But if you're trusting the people that you put into those positions to do that job, then they shouldn't be micromanaged.
Indeed. Well, he needs to get a haircut like me. It takes about 5 minutes. No, Matthias, you carry on doing what you need to do with your hair. Look, that's great. So we've followed the journey so far about somebody that's in absolute control of their sort of destiny here. The business is doing well, results have been good, the culture's great, leadership's awesome, all of this. Then all of a sudden we start to realize that we have a slight Achilles heel. And that is that we support two football teams. We support Liverpool and we support Wrexham. Now, there's a reason for that, I'm sure. Tell me, what could it possibly be that makes supporting two football teams acceptable?
I would say one is higher up the ladder than the other. So I've been a Liverpool fan for 40 something years, showing my age in my late 40s now. But I've always had a soft spot for Wrexham. I'm a proud Welshman, and Wrexham are the nearest, what we're professional, league side when I was growing up. Obviously they fell some down some ladders over, previous years before their recent ASAP as well. So I've been to see Wrexham, played many times. I've been to see Wales play at Wrexham's, racehorse ground, back in the late 80s as well. But I've been to Anfield far more than I've been to Wrexham. So for my friends who are Liverpool fans watching this, it's.
I think it's an easy one for us to have a jibe at. But I have to say, I do think the sort of the why Wrexham is, the proud Welshman, the fact that it is a great story, isn't it?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
What has it done for the community? Has it had a tangible? So if people that don't know about the Wrexham story, they were a team that was struggling, then acquired by two Hollywood stars. One is Ryan Reynolds. Who is the other one?
Rob McElhenney.
Right.
McElhenney,
however
you say it.
They're both actors, right?
Yes, yeah.
Right. So people not listening, the two wealthy American Hollywood actors have invested in Wrexham Football Club. It's become a Netflix documentary phenomenon, yeah, and their success has matched it, right? They've been promoted and promoted and promoted. So what impact has that had on the community?
You mentioned there that they took over a struggling football club, but the whole town and region, I'm a little bit further west than that, on the coast, but the whole region was a little bit down. Industry had gone, all the traditional industries. So it was, kind of the whole region was feeling sorry for it, and they've just come in and they've, injected this, this cash, this excitement. And, quite a lot of people I know from where I live have been to go watch Wrexham through thick and thin over the years when they were in, non-league. And I think the most notable thing is that it's almost impossible to get a ticket to go and watch Wrexham now. Friends of mine who have got season tickets will go and, they'll go into the turf, the pub next door, and there's Canadians, there's Australians, there's New Zealanders, all because of this documentary. So if you think, yes, they've done a great job with the football club and its ascent now into the championship, but all of the local businesses, hotels, restaurants, bars, pubs, everything has just had this huge cash injection from this significant increase in, tourism, based off of what they've done with the documentary.
Yeah, that's fantastic, isn't it? Really is a great story. And well, it might plateau for a while because yes. I guess the next step is quite
Yes.
something, right?
They found a level now which is a little bit more difficult than the previous one, shall we say? Yes.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to give you a moment or two to talk about some of your
Yes,
football
thank you.
allegiances. And look, after more than a decade on the road and 20 years in the industry, 25 years in the industry, I like to imagine that there's quite some learning that we could share with people. You've done that through this conversation, shared many moments of insight and learning. But if there was one personal insight that you discovered maybe about yourself or about leadership or about setting yourself up for success, what might you share with the listeners of Beyond the Blend as they consider lubricant sector as a place to hang their hat?
I mean, I think there is so many facets to the lubricant industry. There's lots of different industries, and if you think of every facet that the lubricants industry support, from oil and gas to manufacturing to everything in between, it's education and consistent learning. I think even now after 20-25 years, every day is a school day. I learn something new every day, whether that's on the technical side, whether it's on the commercial side, or reading a book and things like that. I think I would recommend people to go to as many meetings as they can with people from outside of their kind of immediate wheelhouse, whether that's from a technical standpoint or commercial or leadership, because you go into a meeting with your leadership and you kind of know the product and the service, but they might put a different angle on it, and you think, I like that phrase. Or if you've got a slide deck, I like the way they kind of manifested that information to the audience. And that happens even now continuously for me. Every commercial or account review meeting I go to, I always learn something new, either to deliver myself, to mention to the team, but also it might be about the customer's business as well. And if we're dealing with common customers in, say, one particular industry, if that customer is having these problems and challenges, well, the chances are his competitor, who we might be targeting or also might be servicing, might have that same problem as well. So we can think of solutions and come in prepared and go, well, how did you know I was having these issues? So it's about kind of that continual learning as well. And I think, the other thing is, fairly obvious, but just communication. Sharing the knowledge. Don't be siloed in, this is mine. I'm not telling everybody else, because if you spread that level of communication, particularly amongst your teams and, the people that report to you as well, it helps them become successful. And fundamentally, if they're successful, then, looks good for me. I become successful, and the business, becomes successful then as well. So I think that's the two probably vital ingredients that have served me well, and, hope to continue in the future as well.
I mean, I think that's really helpful. I think it's helpful that we hear advocacy for continued learning and for sharing things that we know. Whilst people might say they're quite, obvious, that was your words. I think what they are is absolutely fundamental, particularly in an environment that sees continual change. As we started our conversation, we started from pipette dropping to something that is far more digitalized and probably AI driven, and relationships that are harder to nurture because of the fact that even though we're closer, we're far more fragmented. So Gwyn, I really want to thank you for sharing that and taking the time to join us.
No problem. Thank you.
On Beyond the Blend. I think there are many insights that people will take from the career beginnings to the commercial role, to the leadership, to the way you manage your priorities, to your choices of sporting alliances.
Some may argue
that. But Gwyn, it's been great chatting with you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. If people wanted to connect and continue the conversation, where might they best go?
So we obviously have our commercial website at polarislabs.com, has our full service levels and contact details on there. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, so my LinkedIn profile, we're very big advocates of LinkedIn and kind of the social selling aspect at Polaris. So you'll find most of our all of our sales team and our leadership on there. But yeah, if you look for Gwyn Simmonds at LinkedIn, you'll see a picture of me with slightly browner hair.
Fantastic. Gwyn, appreciate you making the time for us.
Thank you very much, Steve. Enjoyed it very much. Thanks for having me.
The world's leading lubricants-focused trade event comes to the Middle East this January. Lubricant Expo Middle East will take place from the 20th to 22nd of January at Festival Arena, Dubai Festival City in the UAE. With over 120 exhibitors covering the entire lubricant value chain and 1,500 visitors, including industry leaders, OEMs and end users. It's an unmissable opportunity to meet and do business in this exciting region. Register now to attend for free. Head to lubricantexpo.com/me for more information.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond the Blend. Be sure to follow us to catch next and future episodes as we continue to explore the people within the lubricant market.